Hello and welcome to this ArtCAM Express 2015 demonstration where I'll be showing you how we can create these wedding place settings using ArtCAM Express 2015 and the new Multiplate module. Alongside this, we're going to be using the Smart Engraving module to give our text nice crisp edges. So I'm going to create these by using just a simple heart image that I've got off the internet. So if I minimize this window now, you can see I've got my heart.png and I can simply drag and drop that into ArtCAM Express. I can say OK to the default size, and you can see that I've got all of these colours along the bottom which make up my heart. So first of all, I want to reduce the number of colours so I can create a vector directly from my bitmap. I can do this by selecting the icon to reduce colours and pulling this slider down so there's only 2 colours left in my image, and say OK. Now you can see we've only got 2 colours at the bottom, white and red, and currently white is the primary colour. Red is the secondary. Now I can go into my bitmap to vector functionality. I can choose to create boundary. I want a speckle size of 100 and a smoothness of 75%, and then I want to create a boundary around my secondary colour, and you can see that the red now populates that colour palette there. So now I'm going to say create vectors and then close this dialog down. I can turn down the transparency of my bitmap image to investigate my vectors, or I can simply turn the visibility off completely. So you can see that I've got 2 heart shapes created. I'm only interested in the outer heart shape, so with it selected, I'm going to save and export it. So I'll go to Vectors, Export. I will choose a folder which I've got on my desktop called Place Settings, and I'm simply going to call it Heart. And that's going to save as an EPS by default. Once I've done this, I can close this model down. Now I want to create a new model where I'm going to create all of my place settings within. So I want to create a height and width of 400. I'm going to be working in millimeters, not inches, and I want to have my origin in the center. I'm going to say OK. Now I've got this, I can import my vectors. So I'll go Vectors, Import, Heart.eps, and Open. Now I can center my vector in my model, and you can see that it fills it. I want to resize my vector. So I'm going to open up my Transform tool and resize the width to 45 millimeters and apply. I'm going to zoom in slightly now, and I'm going to rotate clockwise 36 degrees and apply. I'm going to deselect my heart now and simply create a guideline, dragging straight down from the top, and position it somewhere around here. If I just zoom in, you'll see where I've positioned that. And that's so I can create a flat bottom for my heart to sit on. So I can drag it around dynamically or position it in a specific location. I'm just going to dynamically position it there and then use it to draw a straight polyline. So from my left hand vector creation toolbar, I'll create a straight polyline, so we'll have smooth polylines off. And I can simply snap to my guideline, 1 click, 2 click, and then I'll spacebar to finish that and close the dialog down. Now I'm just going to zoom out slightly. I'm going to select both of my vectors. So I've got 1 enclosed vector and 1 open vector, and I'm going to explode vectors. So what this does is it cuts the vector where there's an intersection with another vector. So I can actually delete my guideline now. I'm going to select all of the vectors that I no longer need and delete them. Now I'm left with 2 open vectors. So I can box select them both, and then I want to join them with coincident nodes. I can input a tolerance here, but I'm going to leave it as the default 0.25 millimeters, and I'll just say join. Now you can see that our start point for our vector is here, and we've now only got one vector, and it's closed. So once I've got this, I can start typing some text. So I want to have the name of my guest along here, and then the table number up here somewhere. So I'm going to create vector text. First of all, I want to deselect my heart vector, or I'll start typing along this vector. So I'll create vector text, and I'm going to use the word Rebecca, as it's a reasonably long name and I need it to fit inside my heart. So I want to set the size to be a height of 6.5 millimeters, and I'm going to choose Lucinda Calligraphy to be my typeface, like so. I've got the character spacing set to 5%, and I'm going to leave everything else as default. So I can say create. Now I'm going to create another set of text and simply type table 1. I'm going to select this text, and I'm going to make it a bit smaller, so a height of 3.5 millimeters. 3.5, not 35. Again, Lucinda Calligraphy, and the same spacing. And I want to have this text left aligned and say create. Once I've done that, I can position him in the correct location. So we want to have him somewhere along there. Make sure our guest's name is in the correct place as well, and we want to make sure that this text is centrally aligned. So now I've got my basic template, I need to create my list of names. So in my folder that I showed you earlier, I've actually got an Excel spreadsheet. So if I open that up, you'll see that I've got a list of names, and then I've got a list of numbers, and it's where all of my guests are being seated at my hypothetical wedding. So I've got 48 names there and 6 tables. So there's 8 people per table. And at the top, you don't need to have this, but sometimes it can be beneficial. I've got the title header. So I've got first name and table number. So what we need to do with this is turn it into a CSV file or a text file. So I can do this by just saying File, Save As, and then I'm going to simply choose CSV file from the drop-down list with the same name and say Save. We're going to get a couple of warnings that we're going to lose the formatting, and that's okay. So I'm going to say OK and yes, and then it's very important at this stage to close your Excel spreadsheet down. So I don't need to save my changes, I've already saved it. So what that CSV file is, if I opened it up in a Word document, for example, or I'll open it up in Notepad, all we've got is between the 2 columns we have a comma in there. And that's how ArtCAM reads this file. So you could just create a text file like so, but it's easier to create an Excel spreadsheet and then turn it into a CSV file. So now what I need to do is create the codes which is going to call in the correct name and the correct table number. So I need to edit my text slightly. So I'm going to select the word Rebecca because I've got it in the correct position. I'm going to go back into my text, and with it centrally aligned, I can start typing 2 curly brackets, name, and then close with another 2 curly brackets and say create. Now for table, I'm going to go in and edit the text with it left aligned. I'm simply going to delete the number 1 and finish that, like so, and then create a new text box and type 2 curly brackets, number, abbreviated, and another 2 curly brackets, and I can say create. Now I need to align my third piece of text. So I'm going to bring a guideline from the top. I'm going to zoom right in and make sure that's in the correct position, and then I'm going to simply move this guy so he's in the right location. Now because we've got it left aligned, like so, the start of our curly brackets is where our number is going to be, so we know exactly where it's going to be. So we don't mind that our code that's going to call in the right number is actually coming outside of our heart shape. So now we've got our template, I can delete that guideline as I no longer need it, and I'm going to select my template and open up the Multiplate tool, and that's because we've got the Multiplate module installed. So I'll select that, and if you didn't have your vectors selected, what would happen is it would just prompt you to select your vectors like so. So now I can select my vectors and set my template. Now I'm prompted to load in my data file, so that's my CSV file or my text file, which has all my information separated with commas. So I'm going to load my data. You can see that we've got placenames.csv and say open. We have a preview here, so we've got the first set of names with the correct table number, and if you didn't have your first row as your column headers, you could uncheck this box, but as I do, I'm going to leave it checked, and you'll see that the first name and table number is underlined and it's not going to be included in our design. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to input an X and Y gap of 8 millimeters, and then a sheet boundary of 10 millimeters all the way around my sheet, and then I can hit next. Here we have a preview of how our sheet is going to be laid out, and then now I need to select my variables. So we have name here, and I can choose my first name column. We've got number, and I can choose table number. Now once I've done this, I can select any one of these numbers, and it tells me number 18 is Susie and she's on table 3. So once I've done this, I'm going to zoom out a bit and say create plates. Now ArtCAM automatically generates all 48 of our place settings. So I can close that down. We now have 2 sheets. We've got the default sheet, which is our template, and we've got plate sheet 1, and you can have multiple plates if you have more than 48 place settings. If I zoom in, you'll see we've got all of our names there with the correct table number. So the first thing I want to do is create a Smart Engraving toolpath for all of our text. So I'm going to first of all group all of our vectors. If I just center my model like so, I'm going to select all of the heart-shaped vectors, and group them. So Control G is the shortcut on the keyboard, or you could simply right click. So I'll do that now. I'm going to select all my vectors. I want to group all of the text, so I can shift and deselect all of the heart-shaped vectors, right click, and then I can say group vectors. So now I've done this, I want to go to my 3D view, and I want to create a Smart Engraving toolpath, and that's because we've got the Smart Engraving module added. So I'm going to click on Toolpaths and go to my Smart Engraving toolpath. I'm going to quickly fill in these parameters and show you what's going to happen. I'm going to add a tool to my list, and I'm simply going to use a conical flat 0.115 degree, and you can edit and create new tools by simply copying and then editing if you want, and putting your own parameters in there and say OK. Now I'm going to do corner sharpening, which is going to give us the nice crisp edges on the edge of our text. Only Smart Engrave the profile, and I'm going to type Smart Engrave. I need to finally define my material. So we're going to have a material depth of 4 millimeters and say OK. And I just want to make sure my finish depth there is 0.8 millimeters. So when I say calculate now, we've got this error. Vector intersections were found. Please identify and correct using the vector doctor. Okay, so now I'm going to go straight back to my 2D view and investigate this problem. So I'm going to zoom in a bit and open up my vector doctor, which is this green cross here. If I zoom right in, you can see that we can identify vector intersections. So I'm going to say identify, and when I do this, we've got lots of red circles all over where we've got problematic vectors. If I zoom right in here, you'll be able to see what the actual problem is here with our text. You can see my vector comes down and across, and this is a problem for our Smart Engraving toolpath. So all I need to do is say remove vector loops. So if I keep zoomed in, you'll see what happens here, and say fix problems. And you can see that that problem has been eliminated, but we've still got the little red marker there. So I can clear markers. I'll zoom out a little bit, identify, and you can see that we've got no more issues. So now I can go back to my 3D view. Because my text has been modified, it's no longer grouped, so I can right click and group vectors. I can double click on my Smart Engraving toolpath. I want to make sure I'm on plate sheet 1, select my text. We're going to keep all the same parameters, and I can say calculate now. You can see that my toolpath's been created, and I can simulate that toolpath if I want to. To see this better, we might want to change our simulation settings. So we can choose a simulation colour, so I'll choose light oak and apply. We can also choose a depth colour, so I can choose blue if I want to and apply, so you can see our text pop out there. Now I want to turn my vectors back on. I want to select all of my heart-shaped vectors and create a profile pass. So I'm going to go into my toolpaths, create a profile pass. We've automatically populated the finish depth of 4 millimeters, and that's because our material is 4 millimeters thick. I'm going to choose a 2 millimeter end mill as my profiling tool, and I want to add bridges to my start point. So you remember me pointing out my start point earlier on was around here. I'm just going to add one bridge at my start point, and it means we don't have to have the advanced 2D machining module added in order to hold all of our place settings in the right place so they're not flying off when we're machining it. So I'm going to input a length of 3 millimeters and a thickness of 2 and say apply. Here you can see we've got our representation of our bridge shown there. Now I can say calculate now. All I want to do now is simulate my profile toolpath, make sure it's exactly how I want it. I don't have to have my depth colour on all the time, so you can see our bridges in there. And if I'm happy, I can save and export my toolpaths. So in order to do that, I can click on Toolpaths. The first icon is Save. What I have here is an automatic tool changer. So I'm going to choose the correct post-processor. I want to browse to the correct folder where I want to save it. I'm going to save it in the same folder I've saved everything else, but I'm going to create a new folder called Toolpath, and I'm simply going to call it Place Setting and say Open. We've got different tool numbers for each of my tools, so I'm good to go, and I can hit Save. Now once I've done this, I can navigate to that folder. You can see we now have a folder called Toolpath, and I can go in there and open with Notepad and you can see the G-code that we've created and we can run on our automatic tool changer. So what I've shown you here is how to use the Multiplate module, which is new for ArtCAM 2015, alongside the Smart Engraving module. If you want to find out more about ArtCAM Express, please go to our website and click on the links to find out more about Express and the Express modules. Thank you for watching.